we shall jump right to the association, where we had the NBA trade deadline. It was dead for weeks and nothing had really come out. Lots of rumors swirling, but then we got some bombshell trades, and I guess people who a lot of fans follow the NBA purely for the transactional component, the team building component. They'll watch highlights and then they'll basically just want to see their players get moved from team to team. It's become almost, that is a spectacle within itself. Like the first day of free agency is often just as followed as the NBA finals. And so this was something that people have been waiting for. And I think they probably got enough to at least whet their appetite. And
I still saw plenty of disappointment on Twitter.
yes, and there obviously are trades that people want to see happen. Uh, Definitely some of those top contenders didn't make any serious moves, but still some great stuff that happened and lots for us to break down. And so I guess without further ado, I will jump into my winners and losers from the trade deadline. I guess I'll start with my very first winner, and that would be the Nuggets of Denver. They make moves on the trade deadline. They acquired JaVale McGee for Isaiah Hartenstein in 2 seconds. Then the big move for them was grabbing Aaron Gordon from the Orlando Magic, along with Garrett Clark, for Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, and a protected 2025 first-round pick. Now, yesterday was not a great day to be named Gary. All Garys in the NBA got traded yesterday. Two of them in this deal. And what I love for the Nuggets here is they get a rim protecting big man in JaVale McGee for not much. And that was something that they were lacking. I think they missed Plumlee's presence after he went to Detroit in free agency, and they needed a guy to protect the rim coming off the bench, give them a little bit more energy. And I think Hartenstein just wasn't providing the energy that they required. So they grab McGee, and then they grab Aaron Gordon, who immediately can jump into their starting lineup, is a huge upgrade over Millsap's minutes. Aaron Gordon already in his, I think, 8th season in the league. He came in the league when he's 18. He's 25 now. So feels like he's been in the league forever, but he's still pretty young. He's a guy in Orlando that has constantly been surrounded by terrible spacing, a lot of big men who can't shoot, and a lot of perimeter players who can't shoot. Obviously, we know some firsthand experience of the defense he can provide. He was an excellent defender of Kawhi Leonard in that first round playoff series when Toronto and Orlando played. And he's got the physical tools to match up against anyone, kind of 1 through 5. And so this is a guy that can fill some of those holes defensively in this Denver Nuggets lineup, because a lot of their guys don't play a high level of defense. And so he can hopefully be that stopgap for them. And then on offense, he's not going to be required to do much. He's really great on spot up shooting. He's not that great off the dribble shooting, so this fits well for him. He'll be doing a lot of spot up shooting. And as a cutter, he's another huge target for Jokic to find. One of the big things that people were loving about Michael Porter Jr. is that he's this huge frame, provides a massive target for Jokic to pass to when cutting backdoor or coming off screens. And so Aaron Gordon's another body like that. And Jokic can actually send the ball up there for him to go and get, because he's a great lob threat. So I love the move for the Nuggets, because Gary Harris overpaid and really has taken a step back. They get off of his contract. RJ Hampton could end up being a really, really solid point guard, but not in their timeline. And they've picked up Facundo Campazzo, who's been great for them off the bench, kind of took over what maybe RJ Hampton thought he was going to be. And they just have so much depth at the guard position that they can move off of him. And then a 2025 first is, you got to throw in a first round pick for teams to be satisfied. I'm not sure what the protections are, but it feels like it won't be that much to give up for them, because they're going to be good for quite a few years. So I love those moves for the Nuggets. I guess that kind of feeds into my second winner, is the Orlando Magic. Now, it might not feel like they're a winner right now, because they've been in now this perpetual rebuild for a couple of decades. They had all these top 10 picks that just never managed to fit together or come to fruition. And so finally realizing that they're not going to go anywhere with this team. They moved their top three healthy players. Nikola Vucevic going to the Chicago Bulls with Al-Farouq Aminu for Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter, and 2 first-round picks. They are protected. They are top 4 protected picks. So Orlando getting some pretty decent picks because I don't think the Chicago Bulls are going to be that upper tier team. So it's going to be some mid first round picks for them, which is nice. The 2023 one, you never know. It could end up being like 5th or 6th. So that's pretty good draft capital that you get for Vucevic. And Wendell Carter is a guy who just never really got a shot in Chicago, but he has the pedigree coming from Duke, a top 5 pick, a lot of upside for him. And so a guy that they can throw in and really give the reps and see what he's got. I think that's a pretty decent return for Vucevic, who's probably playing the best he's ever going to play. I don't really see him taking another step. So Orlando selling high and getting the most for that asset. And then they move Evan Fournier for 2 second-round picks. Nothing special there, but they were going to lose him in the offseason anyways, so you get something back for him. And the Aaron Gordon trade, again, not the best that you could probably do for Aaron Gordon, but you get RJ Hampton, who kind of you can play with Cole Anthony or with Markelle Fultz, see which one of those guys really wants to take control of that starting point guard spot. And they get a little bit of draft capital. And so the Magic making the most out of a pretty poor situation. They've got a bunch of guys who are injured who hopefully will be back. And Terrence Ross was killing it yesterday on Twitter with all the memes that he was sending. My personal favorite being the I am the captain now, which terrifying. As a Magic fan, you don't want Terrence Ross running your offense, but funny for the meme's sake, right? My third winner, the Miami Heat, who look to be once again going in for a deep playoff run. When you've got Jimmy Butler in the prime of his career, you've got Bam Adebayo emerging as a top 5 center in this league. You've got the pieces, you got the shooters. You don't have to give up any major pieces, and you add 2 really solid guys. And even before the last second Oladipo trade, the Heat, with a great peripheral move to get Nemanja Bjelica from Sacramento for literally nothing, for Chris Silva and Mo Harkless, guys who they probably wanted to get rid of. They get Bjelica, who is a stretch 4. He's a smart player. He's a guy who, again, probably squandered a little bit in Sacramento just because that team is not very good, but a guy you could definitely see being really, really solid for this Miami Heat team. And so it's a great value pickup. And then, of course, the big splash right as the deadline sounded, Victor Oladipo to the Miami Heat for Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, and a pick swap. And so, again, essentially, Miami's not really giving up anything. That pick swap might come into effect if their pick ends up being higher than Houston's, but not really giving up a draft pick. And then you give up, again, 2 mid-level contracts in Bradley and Olynyk, who you just replaced Olynyk with Bjelica, and Avery Bradley has not really figured into their rotation. So again, 2 moves by Pat Riley where you basically give up nothing and you get 2 guys who are going to come in and play really important minutes for your team. And so Miami making some great moves there, great value adds. It'll be interesting to see what role Oladipo is going to have, if he's going to be starting or if he's going to be your flamethrower off the bench. My guess is he'll be starting because that's what he'll want. But he fits in well there with Butler and Bam, and then you just add a shooter and you've got Bjelica on the floor. That's a pretty scary looking lineup for Miami to run, and maybe it also puts Hero in a more comfortable position. He's had to do a lot this season and his efficiency has dipped, but now if he's a guy coming off your bench and just looking to score, that's probably the better role for him. So again, a move that has benefits outside of just the players you're adding. Another winner, the Philadelphia 76ers. This one partially because a lot of the other top, like the Nets, the Bucks, I guess even the Knicks didn't really make any big ads trying to move their way up the standings. The Heat obviously make the move, which is threatening, but the Sixers, not a lot of their competition made major moves at the deadline. And they pick up George Hill, along with Iggy Brzezikis, the Canadian, for Terrence Ferguson I don't even know if he's on their team. He was on the Nets, I think. Oh my gosh, he's been all over the place. But they give up Tony Bradley in 2 seconds to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oklahoma City Thunder up to 34 draft picks over the next 10 years, which is ridiculous. But George Hill, great ad. This is when you knew they were out on Kyle Lowry in their trade talks, and we'll get to him later. They add George Hill. He's been great for quite a long time now on playoff teams. He's played with the Cavs, the Pacers, the Bucks, and he's a guy who can shoot the ball really well. He can run a bit of your offense. So just more playmaking and more shooting to put in that lineup alongside Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. He can run a great pick and roll set with Dwight Howard if you have him coming off the bench. So again, nice little kind of secondary option because they knew they weren't getting Lowry. They didn't want to give up some of the packages proposed. If I was a Sixers fan, I'd be going crazy because Lowry is great, but giving up Tyrese Maxey, Thibault, and 2 firsts would be absurd. There'd be an absurd price for Lowry. And so they don't end up giving up any of that, and they still get a solid point guard in George Hill. So a great move for Philadelphia. The Utah Jazz are a winner in my eyes because, again, no really top-tier competitors in the West made moves. Neither of the LA teams and Phoenix didn't really make any big moves. And they get Matt Thomas for a future second rounder, small price to pay, just add another shooter. I don't know if Matt Thomas will play a ton of minutes in the playoffs for them, but in the regular season for sure, just adding to their depth of shooting. Feels a little bit like baseball, adding another reliever. You just can never have enough shooting in the NBA. And so nice little small move for them. But this was more of a winner because no one else in their stratosphere really made a big important move. And then the Golden State Warriors, another like minor winner, but they moved Marquise Chris to the Spurs, and due to some sort of cap shenaniganery, this essentially opens up luxury tax room for them for injured players. So because Klay Thompson injured right now, and obviously Steph Curry injured too, it's basically just a cap flexibility move because they're going to still be capped out for quite a few years to come. So just a nice financial breath of fresh air. And so that's why I had to include them because they didn't really do anything, but they still benefited their team in some way. So now we move to the losers. And I was going to say that both of these teams lost this trade, but the more that I thought about it, I came around a little bit, and that is the Atlanta Hawks and the Los Angeles Clippers exchanging point guards. I guess you'd call Lou Williams a point guard. He's more of a shooting guard, but Lou Williams goes to the Hawks for Rajon Rondo. Lou has consistently been just kind of the worst playoff player to have on your team because in the playoffs with the increased physicality, his scoring touch dissipates a little bit, and then he is an absolute swinging fence gate on defense, just blow by after blow by. And the Clippers knew that even though they might need his scoring, they get plenty of scoring from other options, and they just needed to get off of him because he cannot play defense in the crunch time, and he's going to get abused by some of those top players on the other teams. So they pick up Rajon Rondo, playoff Rondo. I initially was hesitant about this trade again because you have your concerns about Rondo, where he doesn't try in the regular season. He doesn't shoot it that well. But then you think back to Bubble Rondo last year, who was a 40% catch and shoot 3-point shooter and was basically the third best player on that Lakers team. And I guess the Clippers are hoping that he has that kind of upside. He moves the ball, which is what they need. They are very stagnant in crunch time. So he'll move the ball. I worry that he's going to try and alpha this team, and it might, again, fracture their locker room. So it's not a move that really bumps the Clippers up, but you could see a positive scenario for them. So that's why I was hesitant to mark them as a loser, but definitely the Atlanta Hawks loser because they add Lou Williams, who is basically kind of like Trae Young in a sense. And I don't get why they wanted to have that. They just, I guess, were really desperate to move off of Rondo. They get 2 seconds from the Clippers. And they had plenty of other guys who were either movable. They have a directive from ownership to win now, and I think they could have made one move to really upgrade their roster, and they didn't do that. And they get Lou Williams, who is going to want to do everything that Trey does, but now he's just going to sit off ball and be upset and go to Magic City and get lemon pepper wings like after every game, which is obviously the story from the bubble that popped up many times. Now he's in Atlanta, but yeah, I don't understand it for the Hawks, but I can't argue with how they've been playing recently. So I guess they're just looking to ride it out into the offseason. The Portland TrailBlazers, I have as a loser.
I'm curious about this one.
Yeah. So my thoughts here. So let's the trade first. The Toronto Raptors, of course, our hometown team, and one of the things that we were all buzzing about here in Canada. They send Norman Powell to the Portland TrailBlazers for Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. I have the Blazers as a loser, not because of who they get in this trade. Norman Powell, awesome. He's been having a breakout year. He's going to bring them some additional scoring. I just think that he's not the right fit there because they already have Dame and CJ, who basically provide what Norm provides. And it doesn't allow them to upgrade a position of need, which is that wing defender. They consistently do not have guys who can defend the top players in the Western Conference. Your LeBron James, your Anthony Davis, your Luka Doncic, your Devin Booker, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, right? Those are the guys that you need to be able to handle if you want to have any chance of moving through the Western Conference. And while you can definitely try and outscore teams, Norman Powell is not going to be that guy who provides the defense. I think everyone's a little bit higher on Norm's defense, and he's definitely had some great performances in the past of defensive energy moments. But as a consistent one-on-one defender, I just don't know if he's going to be able to keep up with some of these bigger guys because he's only 6'3". And it puts a cap on his defensive capabilities. And so if you're running lineups out there with Dame, McCollum, and Norman Powell all on the floor, you're giving up a lot of size against these Western Conference teams that have a lot of size. And so I would have liked Aaron Gordon better for Portland. Obviously, that didn't end up happening. And so I think they lose because they give up a great young player in Gary Trent. I can get to him in a second. And they basically get an older version. It's a rental. And it just, I don't know if it moves the needle for them enough in terms of their like defensive potential. But gonna miss Norm, man. I have to take a moment to just shout him out. He broke on the scene as a rookie, came in and clamped up Paul George in that Indiana Pacers playoff series. Never forget that steal he had late and the huge throwdown to tie it. I was watching that yesterday, playing Marvin's Room, just in my feels. Gonna miss that guy. He's been a great part of this team, a lot of bench energy, and has scored a ton of points for us. Just been an absolute flamethrower, NBA champion. And we salute you, Norman Powell. Thank you so much for everything you've done for Toronto, and best of luck in Portland. And then we'll see where he signs in the offseason because he's probably going to opt out of that player option because he definitely has earned more than his share of money with his performance this season. So we get to Gary Trent Jr. Obviously, Rodney Hood comes back in this trade. The Raptors might hold on to him. They could also just buy him out and he'll go somewhere else. That was not the main piece of this trade. Gary Trent Jr., 22 years of age, 6'5", 215. He is a restricted free agent in this offseason, so the Raptors will either extend him or put a qualifying offer out, and they'll probably match whatever other teams offer him. So he's going to be on our team for the next couple of years. He feels a little bit like a young Norm, which is interesting. You trade off of the older guy who's about to get paid, who you can't afford, to get a younger version who you have control over, which I'm always a fan of. Gary Trent's a little bit longer, a little bit more defensive upside, and he's already a career 40% three-point shooter. Had an excellent bubble playoff run last year for Portland. Was an absolute flamethrower from three and was playing some great defensive minutes. Was one of the main reasons why him and Dame Lillard really were the key reasons why that Blazers team made their improbable run to grab that 8th playoff spot. So I'm really excited to see what he adds. Again, right now with a lineup of Lowry, Van Vliet, Trent, OG, Pascal, it's a ton of defense on the floor, which I love. I love guys who play two-way, and I think Trent has a lot of upside as just a player in general. And so I'm happy with the return because you sell Norman Powell and you could, of course, get draft picks from a contender, but those draft picks are going to be late. And I'd rather have a sure thing that you have control over and are able to develop. So I'm happy picking up Gary Trent, and uh, we'll see how he fits in this new role. Looking to see what he can do, and sad about Norm leaving, but excited to see what Gary Trent can do. All right, we will move on to more losers. I have the New Orleans Pelicans as losers, and not because they didn't trade Lonzo Ball. I actually was a fan of them keeping him. That was a big name that people wanted to see get moved. But I think Lonzo fits well with Zion as a playmaker, as a guy who can run in transition. His shooting has drastically increased. Um, he doesn't need the ball in his hands, so he's a guy you can put around Zion. And so I think it was smart of New Orleans to at least ride it out and see what he's going to be asking for in restricted free agency. Uh, but they move off of JJ Redick and Nicolo Melli. They send them to the Dallas Mavericks for James Johnson, Wesley Wandu, and they pick. I think they're just losers because that just continues to restrict the spacing on the floor for their top guys. JJ Redick is kind of he's the best shooter on their team, and he spaces the floor so wonderfully for those guys. And so moving him and Melly, who has come in at times to play a stretch five, and in those minutes, Zion has just absolutely wrecked the entire league. And so they move two guys that space the floor, and it's just gonna bundle things up. I don't think they're really trying to run for that play-in seed anymore with this trade. I guess you look to add one more pick, see how you can recreate the roster in the offseason, and then this window is open with Zion already. He is so incredibly fun to watch and so dynamic that starting next season, New Orleans, they have to be trying to go for one of those top 6 playoff seats because this guy is ready, locked, and loaded to take over the league.
It does feel like they're just a couple stretch players away, and Redick was not having the season they hoped for. So retool, reload, and try again this coming off season.
Yeah.
I agree with you that this team looks ready. Just it's not quite clicking on the 3-point spacing.
The spacing, and the biggest thing for them is when their top guys are going to decide to lock in defensively, because right now their defense is atrocious. It's like the worst defense in the league, especially based on the talent that they have. That's another reason why you don't trade Lonzo. He's been their best defender consistently all season. But as soon as Zion and Brandon Ingram decide to play passable defense, that's when the ceiling of this team gets raised. And so you're also looking in the offseason to maybe add a couple more of those two-way guys. And Redick obviously tries hard, but he's not the best defensive presence. And so there probably might be some options out there for you to upgrade at least defensively and still have that spacing. The Houston Rockets are another loser of mine. They get basically nothing for Oladipo, and that was who they wanted in the James Harden trade as opposed to Karis LeVert. And I think LeVert would have been a much better fit on that team, but they make a mistake. They go with Oladipo, hoping he can raise his trade value and move off of him, but they get Bradley and Olynyk, so basically nothing for him. I don't even know why you trade him at that point. I guess just to get something. And they're still stuck in a weird spot because they don't have much to show for the James Harden trade. They had to give up a bunch of picks for Westbrook, so they don't even have their own pick, really. They're basically playing out this season with a mishmash roster of Wall, Wood, Augustine, who they got in the PJ Tucker trade. Jayshawn Tate is lovely, so they'll keep him. You've got Eric Gordon still, like just a really weird roster. And if you don't have control over your first pick, then they're just going to be looking to play spoiler. But they've lost. They went on 18-game losing streak that they just snapped. And yeah, just looking bleak for them. I feel for Houston fans. The Cleveland Cavaliers I have as a loser. They did get something for JaVale McGee, which was great for them, but Andre Drummond was another guy they were trying to move at the deadline, and they're going to end up having to buy him out. So you lose that for nothing, which sucks because you want to at least get something. So that's why I have them as a loser, that they weren't able to move Andre Drummond anywhere. And last but not least, we get to our final loser. And again, this is a controversial take. I thought he wasn't going anywhere, and he didn't end up going anywhere. But I think Kyle Lowry comes out of this a little bit of a loser, if not for the fact that he is not moving to a contender where he can try and go for another championship. It's that it feels like his trade value ended up being diminished by the end of the trade deadline, and teams really put a ceiling on what they thought he was and what they were willing to give up for him. And it feels like there's still a little bit of disrespect going Lowry's way. So at the beginning of the day, I was saying no way he gets traded unless he wants to. Obviously, all that stuff came out the night before when they beat the Nuggets. He was plus 43 in that game. He looked pretty emotional leaving the arena, gave the peace signs to the camera. Drake called him while he's in the press conference. All signs seemed to be that he actually thought he was leaving. And so that kind of ticked me off that, okay, there is going to be something that happens here, because I didn't think he was going to get traded. As the day goes on, you see Philadelphia's in, Miami's in, and then the Lakers enter the conversation, which was really, really interesting. The Sixers, of course, as soon as they get George Hill, I knew they were out. They weren't willing to give up. Tyrese Maxey is probably their main sticking point. And then, of course, with Thibault and 2 firsts, that's a big package to give up if you're the Sixers. And then the Heat and the Lakers in on Lowry, but the sticking point for both of those teams was Tyler Hero and Talen Horton-Tucker. Tyler Hero, a little bit more understandable, has an untapped potential, and you can see the ceiling with him. And Miami is just really high on him. They were trying to center their package around Duncan Robinson, a Kelly Olynyk, and maybe a pick swap of some kind. And that just didn't do it for the Raptors. It wasn't enough. You want to get a haul if you're going to move off of your franchise player. And then on the Lakers side, if Talen Horton-Tucker is the guy holding up your deal, it's a little odd to me because he's been fine and the body type is there, but I don't think he's really going to develop into anything too special. And so if you're not trading for Kyle Lowry in this, when you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis because of Talen Horton-Tucker, I guess the Lakers think he's going to be the next Dwayne Wade or something. That was funny. Their package was going to be Schroeder, KCP, and then Talen Horton-Tucker, and probably, I guess, like another player of some kind. The Raptors even moved Terrence Davis. They moved Matt Thomas to open up roster spots for a potential trade, which didn't end up happening. In the end, both of those guys, we get second round picks. I'm not really worried about losing either of those guys, especially Terrence Davis, who, of course, had his issues and really hasn't played the same this season. So not too much of a problem there, but just, yeah, Lowry, in the end, these teams had their guys who they didn't want to give up for Lowry, and shows that the league still undervalues him compared to how we value him. And so I'm okay with him staying. We love him here in Toronto. We'll see what happens at the end of the season. But for now, Toronto fans, enjoy the ride. I'm upset that they didn't upgrade at the center position at all. But after you move off of Powell, it's a lateral move. They can definitely still compete with Gary Trent, but it does feel like they are set with this team for the rest of the season. And whatever happens, happens. Yeah. So shout out Kyle Lowry, man. We're happy that you're still here.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking all season about, are we going to trade him? Are we going to trade him? And then everyone in Toronto pretty emotional at the thought of him leaving. So it'll be still, I think that sentiment will bubble right back up come free agency, but we'll have plenty of time to talk about it there, maybe after the draft, after any potential trade moves there, after we see how the rest of this Raptors season plays out and have a better idea of what exactly next season has in store for us.
Yeah.
But yeah.
My heart wouldn't have been able to handle losing Powell, Lowry, and Mr. 99 all in one day.
It's a lot to ask
Yeah.
of us.
So there goes. There's my long-winded winners and losers of the NBA trade deadline. March Madness, real quick. the Sweet 16 this weekend. Going to be some great games. And if you are an NBA fan, I suggest you tune in to watch Evan Mobley against the Oregon Ducks this weekend. And the other game on tap, Michigan and Florida State, to watch Franz Wagner versus Scotty Barnes. So those are my two recommendations. If you have time this weekend, tune in and watch March Madness. That is it for my basketball corner. We'll take a quick break and come back.